Somebody help me. I'm inside the Cerritos. You should be able to see. Go to the Master Systems display and zoom in to where my comm badge signal is, and you should be able to actually see me in there. The ship is so cool. Am I in the future? Holy cow. Huh? No, not yet, not yet. I'm not ready to go yet. No! Bye-bye. Now I'm back here. On this ship. Ugh. We just watched episode 3 of season 2 of Lower Decks. 3 episodes in. And I think every episode has been better than the last. I gave the last 2 the same review score, but I think I gave both a 6.5. Even though perhaps the second one was a little better than the first one, it was still within the margin of error, so I had to give them both a 6.5. I'm not going to go breaking it down to 3 or 4 decimal places, forgive me, but I really think that we're on a roll with this season. I think every episode, while the second episode was a little better than the first episode, I think this third episode is actually a lot better than the second episode. And we still do not have a strong emotional core or philosophical question for our stomach to digest. But that being said, this episode was fun. I actually thought this episode was funny. Call me crazy, but I had a few laughs in this episode. And for one brief moment, I had an inadvertent smile on my face. And I felt something happen in my heart. And for a fleeting instant in time, I thought I was watching Star Trek. There's just one point in this episode. So with that out of the way, let's break down the A, your B, your C plot. Are we going to have an episode with a D plot at some point? Get on it. In this episode, the A, B, C plot, they don't really interconnect in any meaningful way, which is kind of sad. It's always fun to see an episode written well enough that the plots intertwine together at the end. It's not necessary for an episode to be good, but it's cool to see it, and this episode doesn't really have it. The A plot, B plot, and C plot all resolve themselves independently. So let's get into our A plot, our primary plot. In this episode called We'll Always Have Tom Paris, which is a play off the TNG episode We'll Always Have Paris. Except this time it's referring to Tom Paris from the Voyager. Or as they call it in this episode, the VOY. Poking fun at Star Trek name abbreviations has always been fun. My favorite one is DSN. Can you guess what that means? I like the joke abbreviations like STD and yeah. I like I like calling Enterprise STE instead of ENT. Just have fun with that online. Just start coming up with like fake abbreviations that no one uses and swear that that's the one you used your entire life. And not admit that you just made it up. Just try that. It's so fun. So in this episode, we have Dr. Tana, or T'Ana. Can we quit it with the names? Dr. Tana is a Cation, a cat. Okay, don't call her a cat. Shh, but she might be a cat. Chief medical officer, I believe, on the Cerritos. is going through kind of like a pon farr type idea. If you don't know what that is, Vulcans periodically go into sex craze mode, and they have to release sexual desire, kind of like they're in heat. What am I talking about? Cats go in heat on Earth, and I'm sure you guys know what goes on Earth. So why did I bring up a Star Trek reference to help you understand that a cat goes into heat? Is my knowledge base this warped? Is it this geared towards Star Trek and not towards actual Earth reality? Has been a while since I've been on Earth. So Dr. Tana is basically testing Tendi and saying, can you bring back this item for me? I really need it. It's a huge thing, and it's in a wooden box. Can I trust you with this? Tendi always wants to impress. She always has to be the best. And she's the opposite of Mariner, which is why no one likes Mariner. If you like Mariner, that's fine. I kind of don't. And Mariner is classic Mariner in this episode, which means she sucks. Mariner and Tendi have a girls' trip. Oh my god, girls' trip. Wow. Where just Mariner and Tendi go on an adventure to a planet to retrieve Dr. Tana's thing. We're not going to reveal what it is yet. Yeah, I can totally imagine Starfleet officers saying something like that. Girls' trip. It's a guy's night out. Yeah, I've heard that before. That's something I hear all the time in Starfleet. Yeah, that makes sense. So they get it, and it's a large crate. It's a big box. Okay? And they get it from a planet, which is kind of like Free Cloud from Picard, if you remember that garbage. You know, their lawless planet where people go to have a good time. And I believe you can see an establishment on this planet called Quarks, which is an interesting callback. They get this wooden crate, and they take one peek inside. One little peek can't hurt, right? One little peek. And they open it up, and it's a scratching post. So it's kind of like a scratching post for occasion when they're in heat. And it's ancient and a traditional item. It has a lot of history behind it. Okay. Which is going to come up later. So this is probably Tana's grandmother's sex scratching post, if you will. And of course, Mariner and Tendi get into a fight over it like idiots, and they break it. Who saw that coming? I knew that was going to happen the minute I saw it. And Mariner and Tendi have numerous harebrained schemes for how to get it fixed. One of them is getting somebody to fix it, and then another one is getting someone to create an exact forgery of it. Needless to say, these fail, and they end up destroying the statue even further. Eventually, they're coming back with half of it, and that half that they do have is essentially smashed. Bad job, guys. However, they get back to the Cerritos, and Mariner has this idea to ram the Cerritos and then blame the lack of control on a bee in the cockpit. And then that way, when they rammed into the Cerritos, they could say, "Oh no, look, Tana, we smashed your thing. Whoops, I guess it was just a bee." It's not Tendi's fault or Mariner's fault. And by God, they kind of believe it. But it doesn't seem to matter, because Tana didn't want the thing that was in the box. She wanted the box because she's a cat. And as we all know, cats love boxes, right? They love getting in them. They love hiding in them. And somehow this was enough to relieve Dr. Tana's heat that she was going into. I don't know. But this begs the question, why did Tana not care about the family heirloom that was in the box? She said, "Oh, I don't care. I don't want what's in it. I didn't want you to look at it because it's a little embarrassing," rightly so. But I didn't really care about that. I just wanted the box. Who cares about the heirloom that's been in my family for multiple generations? See how they didn't really think it through that well? It was funny, but for what reason did it have to be an heirloom? inside the box. If it didn't matter what was in the box because they were going to destroy it, they should have made it something else. Okay? Something else that would be important but didn't have history to it. Because then it would make sense if Tana secretly didn't care about it. I can understand why she didn't want people seeing her scratching post, though. Maybe that's a little bit demeaning. Whatever. That's the end of A plot. B plot is where this episode gets its name from. You'd think this episode would be called, like, Girls Trip, you know, but it's actually called, We'll Always Have Tom Paris, featuring Robert McNeil, the voice of Paris, reprising his role. When was the last time he played Paris? Probably a while ago. I wonder, was it fun slipping back into the shoes of Tom Paris? I wouldn't mind slipping into his shoes. Wink, wink. What does that mean? We'll never know. Basically, Boimler has a Tom Paris collector's plate, and he shows his collection of VOY plates, which is from all the different bridge crew of the Voyager, the collector's plate, which I guess is something that could actually exist in reality, because Voyager was a pretty big deal. They came back from the, Delta Quadrant? After a long mission. It was a harrowing trip. Maybe they would have collector's plates made of the bridge officers that you could actually, like, put in your quarters. Like, I wonder, do they actually do that? Like, can I get a Captain Kirk plate right now? You know, for when he goes on his 5-year mission. He's about to. And we're all gearing up for it. And the Enterprise is in layover right now. We should go there and check it out. Anyway, Tom Paris is arriving on the ship, and Boimler wants Tom Paris to sign his plate. And of course, Boimler, this is the first time he's back on the Cerritos since he was on the Titan. At least this version of Boimler, anyway. See the episode 2 review for more information on why there's 2 Boims. The Boims wants his plate signed, but the doors aren't recognizing his presence since the security has been upped since the last time he was on the Cerritos. So he's running into doors, getting caught in them, and he says, I know the Cerritos inside and out. I can just go through a Jeffries tube to get where I need to go to meet Tom. And wouldn't you know it, he ends up getting stuck in a Jeffries tube with portholes in front and behind him, trapping him inside a little hole, and he has to figure out a way to get out. He's clearly losing his mind because he's talking to the plate, and the plate is talking back to him in the voice of Tom Paris. The Tom Paris plate he has is telling him that he needs to get out of this situation. So he starts messing around inside the pipe, and he's releasing strange chemicals, and the instrumentation, air, whatever, is blowing in his face, and he's going all kooky. And by the end of it, he's basically resigned to dying inside the Cerritos, inside the Jeffries tube, which begs the question, why didn't he use his comm badge? Why didn't he go like, boop, boop? Somebody help me, I'm inside the Cerritos. You should be able to see, go to the Master Systems display, and zoom in to where my comm badge signal is, and you should be able to actually see me in there, and you should be able to open the portholes. But, I can understand Boimler being a little embarrassed to look that insane in front of Tom Paris. I wouldn't want to do that. But, in the biz, we have things we can say over comms that are like a code that we've worked out. If we need to say something embarrassing, we have little tricks. There's things we can do. I won't get into it here, because if I did, then you know my tricks. And I can't tell you that. Boimler is basically in a duct directly above the bridge. So now we know for a fact that there's no sunroof on the bridge. It's actually just Jeffries tubes above the bridge, which is interesting to point out. Because he breaks a panel underneath him, falls down onto the bridge, and he looks so crazy. His hair is all poofed out. He's got no shirt on, and he's full of dirt and whatnot. And wouldn't you know it, Tom Paris thinks he's a Kazon. if you remember from those early Voyager episodes. Yeah, no one really likes those aliens. They're kind of boring. But he does kind of look like a Kazon in his fit of insanity. And Tom Paris beats him up, as you would, defending the bridge from an interloping Kazon. And the episode wraps up with Boimler going back to see Tendi, Rutherford, and the rest with a black eye given to him freshly by Tom Paris. And after having been invited now to an apology get-together over drinks when he can actually get his plate signed. So Boimler ends up on top in the end after a bit of a trip through the Jeffries tubes. Mariner ending up in the brig again after the stunt crashing the shuttlecraft into the Cerritos. Now, plot C is Rutherford going on a quest to find out how Shax came back. Honest to God, Shax is back. Remember that guy who died at the end of season 1? The big emotional takeaway for me with season 1 was Shax dying to save Rutherford. And before Shax saves him, he calls Rutherford Baby Bear, which is what he called him when he was trying to train him for security, if you remember the first episode of season 1. And it just bookended the whole thing so neatly. And it's something that I actually kind of thought about afterwards, was how Shax was willing to just kill himself to save Rutherford because it was his duty. And Rutherford was his baby bear. And that's something that I always held in my heart, you know. Even it's just a little thing. I'm only looking for little things these days. The big, sweeping, broad questions, those are way out of our reach now with Star Trek. So just the little emotional nuggets, I really value. But bringing back Shax kind of ruins it. Shax is back alive in this episode, and the big joke is that Rutherford can't figure out why. Because Rutherford is embarrassed to ask him how he came back to life. Because I guess it would still sting for you if you just came back to life and somebody asks you how you died. Maybe you wouldn't want to talk about it. And the joke is that people around Rutherford are asking Shax, "Oh my God, you're back to life. How'd you come back to life?" And then Shax would lose his mind and say, "Oh, too soon. Why did you bring that up? Oh no. Urgh." Maybe not exactly in those words. But Rutherford does eventually confront Shax about how he came back to life. And Shax says, "Do you really want to know? It's pretty scary. Once you figure it out, you'll never be the same man ever again." And Rutherford says, "Okay, tell me." And Shax tells him, and we get a terrifying zoom into Rutherford's face as Shax explains to him how I had to confront 3 versions of my own father and I had to fight them and blah blah blah, and basically how he went on a Bajoran spirit quest of some sort. I expected more references to Bajoran lore, honestly, in this description, like fighting paw wraiths and what have you, if you remember your DSN lore. However, we don't get any of that, but I half expect them to bring this up later. If Shax stays in these plots, I half expect them to reveal Avery Brooks reprising his role as Sisko, talking about how the emissary of the Bajorans fourth dimensionally plucked Shax out of his own death and placed him back on the Cerritos in some way. Some Bajoran mumbo jumbo. I don't really understand all of it, but you get what I mean. I think we may see that later, and I think they're saving it, and that's why the explanation for this episode, the resolution for the C-plot, felt underwhelming, I think intentionally, because they're saving it for later, when we really explain the spirit quest that Shax went on to save his own life, even though he died. A little weird, but not unprecedented. People have come back in a multitude of ways, as are elaborated on in this episode if you watch it. So they do justify it, kind of. Let's hand wave it away for now. And that's your episode. That's, we'll always have Tom Paris in a nutshell. Visually, not as good as the first episode. The first episode obviously had the Miranda class. I love ships. You put a canon ship in there for me, and I'm already loving it. This episode didn't really have it. However, we did get a zoom in of the Cerritos' engineering section. You know the little pod that's between the nacelles and the Cerritos? I guess it is occupied. I thought maybe it was one of the unoccupied types, like you see on the Nebula class or something like that. But it wasn't. It's actually occupied. Makes me think of the section on the Oberth, right? At the bottom. If you look at it, the Oberth class. I always wondered, how do we get into that section? Do we just transport into it? How you get into this engineering section on the Cerritos is not explained. We don't see anyone go through a turbo lift through the nacelle. You would have to actually go through a turbo lift constructed into the side of the nacelle, though, to get to the engineering section. Or maybe they just transported it in just to make it simple. Who knows? We don't know yet. But we did see the engineering set design, if you will, which was very cool, and it looked very canon, and my god, things kind of look canon in Lower Decks. So, bravo, eh? This episode, no strong emotional core, lots of funny bits, got some action, and when we were approaching the planet where we were going to find Tana's wooden box with her scratching post in it, we saw the shuttlecraft approach the planet with a description of the planet on the top left that just looks so much like TNG. We were just going to this planet for peaceful reasons, and we were just going on an adventure. And Mariner and Tendi were in the shuttle. And for a moment, I was interested in where we were going and what we were going to see. And I felt like I was watching Star Trek again. That's the moment I was referring to earlier. If you watch this episode and you allow your heart to feel, you may have the same experience. Your mileage may vary. But that was a special moment for me. Something just came over me and I just experienced it. The spirit of Star Trek inhabited my body again for the first time in a lot of years. I didn't feel so cynical and sad in that moment as I normally do. So for that reason, and all the reasons listed before, I'm going to give this episode a 7. This is my favorite episode of the season so far. Wasn't pound for pound as interesting as the second episode, but I think it makes up for it with the funny bits. Some of the gags land, and there wasn't a whole lot of bad language in this. And when the Starfleet officers did end up hitting each other, when Tom Paris was attacking Boimler, he did it because he thought he was a Kazon, which makes sense. So we have co-worker violence that makes sense this time. And it's not just the sad stuff from season 1 where some lady in Starfleet just body slams Ransom over a table for no reason at all. We have violence that kind of makes sense in this episode. Even if the Orions in this were portrayed as a little bit overly violent, one of the planets they go to is like an Orion outpost, and they're going to try to get Tendi's cousin to make a replica of the scratching post. It doesn't really matter. But the Orions in there seemed like they were going to kill Mariner just for being a human. I seem to recall Orions thriving most in environments comprised of many different species. I don't know, maybe I'm imagining it. It feels like the Orions depicted in this were really violent for no reason. Maybe it was just a writing trick to give some tension to the plot where there wasn't any before. Who knows? We'll never know. But I know right now, if I go to an Orion-occupied world, and if I take my uniform off, I can kind of walk around and not get killed. It's dangerous. It's weird to do it, but I kind of can do it, right? That's just me talking, and I'm obviously like 100 and some odd years for Lower Decks. When does Lower Decks take place? 24, 10, something? 2380? I don't know. It's after Nemesis anyway. So I got a while to wait. At the end of the day, watch it or not, I came away kind of happy. I'll be watching the next one. And I'll see you guys later. In fact, I'll see you this time next week, just about, after I watch the 4th episode of this season. So there's your abbreviated blow-by-blow with my take on this episode. What did you think? Post it below. Or not. I'm Lieutenant Mark, and I'm just about to disappear right now. Goodbye.